Hey, peace, 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 and power and elevation. Peace be to you guys. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth to all of you out there. So this is a Juneteenth special. But we've been celebrating Juneteenth for a while. We've been celebrating it before they even made it a federal holiday. You know what I'm saying? So people are still conflicted about, well, should we celebrate Juneteenth nowadays it's become a federal holiday? Yeah, you still should celebrate it. We was already celebrating it. It was a national holiday for all of us, especially here in the South. We were celebrating it. You know what I'm saying? So you have a reason to celebrate Juneteenth. You have a reason to celebrate your ancestors. You know what I'm saying? Because if we go back into the history, June 19th of 1865 in Galveston, Texas, right? That's when the Proclamation of Proclamation of Emancipation of Slavery took place. And because it took place, right, that gave the slaves a reason to celebrate, because basically it was like, oh, that's the end of slavery. We're good to go. So yes, you have the right to celebrate that. That's your heritage. That's your foundation. See, what I can't stand as Black people, we think that, oh, we should not celebrate something all of a sudden because it's on the mainstream. That shouldn't stop nothing. You know what I'm saying? You don't hear any other nationality or any other ethnic group saying that they're going to stop celebrating their culture or their lifestyle because it's now on the mainstream. No. So we should continue to honor that. We should not let that go down the drain. That's our Independence Day, if you ask me. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather celebrate that than celebrate the 4th of July. So, yes, we have every right to celebrate it. You know what I mean? We should celebrate. That shouldn't be no question. Now, if you choose not to celebrate, then that's your own personal thing. That's your business. But that shouldn't be no debate. Should Black people celebrate Juneteenth? That's just ludicrous to me. It's insane. It's insane to me. If you choose not to celebrate it, then that's on you. That's your business. Do your own thing. You ain't gotta celebrate nothing. But let the rest of us do. Let the rest of us celebrate it. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So, reason why I'm talking about Juneteenth today, having a Juneteenth special, is because we got to go into the history about Houston, Texas, and Galveston area, right? So we're going all the way out there to the good old Texas. And while we go out there to Texas, we're going to look at Freedmen Town, which is the 4th Ward area of Houston. And we're going to look at this area called the Settlement, which is also a part of Galveston County. All right, so I try to gather up as much information I possibly could. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present some sources to you all, and then I'm going to give some book recommendation. Now, I won't be on here for long, all right? So it's going to be kind of like a quick video. But let me go ahead and get started. All right, so let's look at the settlement, right? And you can find this information right here on blackpast.org. So according to this website, and here's the picture right here. It says the historic Bell family home, the settlement, Texas City, Texas. So Texas City, Texas is like 50 minutes away from Houston. Okay, so that's the house right here. And it says the settlement, Galveston County, Texas, from 1867 to 1953. And here it is. The settlement in current day Texas City, Texas, was an independent community of African Americans established after the end of the Civil War. The county was located on 320 acres in Galveston County, Texas, near the Galveston, Houston, and Henderson Railroad. Many of the initial settlers worked as cowboys on the Chisholm Trail. The roots of the settlement date back to an 1864 labor containment camp on Clear Creek in North Galveston County for oppressed slaves and free blacks during the Civil War. By 1867, Judge William J. Jones began selling parcels on his lands to freedmen he considered to be a particularly industrious character in what would become the settlement community. Many of the initial settlers had worked for George Washington Butler as cowboys. Two founding settler families of the settlement, the Britton and Phillips families, were related by marriage. They shortened the name to our settlement. Black residents of nearby Galveston called the community Campbellville after the founder of its first church in the 1870s. Its first school teacher was Katie Bell, who came to the settlement in 1874 with her husband, Calvin, one of the cowboys employed by George Butler. And right here, by 1880, the community consists of 42 permanent residents, many of them families headed by cowboys. By the mid-1880s, however, they began abandoning this lifestyle in favor of more regular sedentary work in agriculture or the railroad industry. By 1900, most of its 83 residents were still relatives and descendants of the initial founding families, including the Brittons, Bell, and Phillipses. The settlement boasted in an 88% adult literacy rate, and the majority of its residents were landowners. All right. So in 1911, the electric interurban train track between Houston and Galveston was constructed through the middle of the settlement, dividing its approximately 120 residents in half. A train stop called Highland Station was built where the settlement met the border of nearby Lamarck, Texas, and as a result, many local residents began referring to the settlement as Highlands. By 1920, the community featured a Masonic lodge, a hotel, and a restaurant. Its children had access to a government-supported school, the Lamarck Colored School. In 1920, or in the 1920s, its population more than doubled and expanded into nearby Lamarck, thus losing some of the community's distinctive identity. Many of its workers abandoned farming jobs in favor of industrial work at nearby plants in Texas City. In 1929, nearly a decade before many of the surrounding communities, the settlement's population of around 400 obtained access to electricity. In 1938, the community gained Lincoln School, a new school for all grades. A second facility, the Woodland School, was completed in 1952. By 1950, the community featured Carver Park, nightclubs, beauty shops, a pharmacy, a photographer's studio, and gas stations. As the settlement grew, it came into increasing contact with its larger neighboring municipalities. On September 9th, 1953, Texas City annexed the land once called the settlement. As Texas began to racially integrate by the late 1960s, the former settlement schools did as well, and much of its identity as a place for self-sufficient African Americans became less prominent. The community continues to host an annual Black Cowboy Rodeo, however, and in 2010, some of the original territory of the settlement became listed on the National Register of Historic Places. All right, so that's the story about the settlement in Houston, Texas, or in Galveston County, Texas, which is in the area now known as Texas City, Texas. So you had free African Americans that were able to settle into towns and start constructing their own community, building their own businesses, having their own schools, and so many things. So now let's go into looking at information about the Fourth Ward. or Freedmen Town. Okay, I'm back, you guys. I'm sorry about that. All right, so let's look at the information about Fourth Ward. So here's the information in regard to Fourth Ward, which is where Freedmen Town was located. All right, so Fourth Ward, Houston. Fourth Ward is one of the historic 6 wards of Houston, Texas, United States. The Fourth Ward is located inside the 610 loop directly west of and adjacent to downtown Houston. The Fourth Ward is the site of Freedmen's Town, which was a post-U.S. Civil War community of African American. All right. The Fourth Ward was established as one of 4 wards by the city of Houston in 1839. By 1906, it included much of what is, as of 2008, downtown and near town. At that point, the city stopped using the ward system. It says the area was the site of Freedmen's Town, composed of recently freed slaves. The first freed slaves departed the Brazos Rivers cotton plantation in 1866 and entered Houston via San Felipe Road, now named West Dallas, in the portion from downtown Houston to Shepherd Drive. The slaves settled on the Buffalo Bayou's southern edge, constructing small shanties as houses. Brush arbors along the bayou and borrowed churches were used as houses of worship. Several more ex-slaves leaving plantation arrived in Freedmen's Town. One brush arbor ultimately became the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church, the church where Jack Yates served as pastor. Yates and his son, Rutherford Yates, became major community leaders in the early days of the Fourth Ward. The neighborhood became the center of Houston's African American community in the late 19th century and early 20th century. The 1,000 freed slaves who settled the community selected the site along the southern edge of the Buffalo Bayou. Since the land was inexpensive and because white Americans did not want to settle on the land, which was swampy and prone to flooding, the settlers of Freedmen's Town paved the streets with bricks that they had made themselves. An oral tradition said that in the early 20th century, members of the congregation of the Reverend Jeremiah Smith paved Andrew Street with the first bricks after the city of Houston refused to pave it. Yet Yates, Smith, and Ned P. Pullen were three of the major Fourth Ward area ministers. The residents provided their own services and utilities. Residents included blacksmiths, brickmakers, doctors, haberdashers, lawyers, and teachers. From 1905 through the 1940s, the Freedmen's Town area included what was Houston's largest baseball venue through 1927, West End Park. It was home to the city's minor league baseball team, the Houston Buffaloes, and it was the first venue for Negro Major League games. At the turn of the century, Black ministers established businesses and churches and remained as community leaders. During the same period, Italian Americans moved into Fourth Ward, including Freedmen's Town. The Italian Americans opened small businesses and over a period of time acquired more and more Fourth Ward property. Many had extended mercantile credit to customers and seized property from the customers after they failed to pay off their debts. Let me read that again. Many had extended mercantile credits to customers and seized property from the customers after they failed to pay off their debts. Their descendants, as of the year 2000, continue to be owners of many residences in the Fourth Ward. In 1909, African Americans organized a library at Booker T. Washington High School. They were prohibited from accessing Houston's Lyceum and Public Library. In 1912, the Carnegie Colored Library of Houston was dedicated. It was demolished in 1962 when Interstate 45 was constructed through the Fourth Ward. As more and more families moved in, the neighborhood increasingly became crowded. A narrative that accompanied the 1984 application of the Fourth Ward to become listed in the National Register of Historic Places, based on various historical documents and deeds records, said that the crowded condition and high rent prices may have led to a riot in 1917 when African American soldiers stationed in the area attacked white people. By the 1920s and the 1930s, the population density of Freedmen's Town was almost 6 times that of the average of the entire city of Houston. In 1920s, the Third Ward surpasses the Fourth Ward as the center of Houston's African American community. Now it goes in to talk about the decline area. So let's see. The Fourth Ward lost prominence due to its inability to expand geographically, as other developments hemmed in the area. Mike Sender of the Houston Chronicle said that the local historians traced the earliest signs of decline to 1940 and that it was influenced by many factors, including the opening of Interstate 45 and the construction of Allen Parkway Village, a public housing complex of Housing Authority of the City of Houston, or HACH, which is now Houston Housing Authority, that opened in the 1940s. Located on the north side of the Fourth Ward, it originally was an all-white development that had the same name, St. Felipe Courts. The opening of Interstate 45 in the 1950s separated an eastern portion of the Fourth Ward area from the community. That portion became the Allen Center business and hotel complex and is now considered to be part of downtown Houston. The freeway also served the community connection with downtown itself. After the civil rights reforms of the 1960s, Black homeowners began leaving the Fourth Ward, leading to further decline. The freeway construction and urban renewal programs led to the loss of portions of the community. Now, it then right here goes on to talk about the redevelopment. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read this part right here, the first two paragraphs. So it says by the 1970s, many of the original Fourth Ward residents left to go to other communities. Crime and the prevalence of crack cocaine became issues affecting the community. Starting in the 1970s, the city of Houston wanted to demolish Allen Parkway Village while residents fought to have the entire structure remain. Plans to replace the Fourth Ward with condominiums in a part date to that decade. John Novia Lomax of the Houston Press said that the Fourth Ward had been embattled due to its proximity to downtown Houston, and that developers have long seen the area's brick streets and ramshackles, century-old shotgun shacks as an inexcusable, private-stricken, drug and crime-infested blots on the landscape of otherwise prosperous West Side Interloop Houston. It says in the Handbook of Texas, says in the 1980s and 1990, the continued future of the Fourth Ward as a Black community came under serious attack due to plans to demolish Allen Parkway Village and replace the complex with the housing for high-income people of office buildings. The Handbook of Texas said that citizen opposition and, more importantly, in the mid-1980s, economic decline delayed those plans. The Handbook of Texas said that the neglect of the housing units and the resulting disappearance of those units, the reluctance of investors to invest capital into the Fourth Ward, and the future of the neighborhood all undermine the viability of the Fourth Ward. On January 17, 1985, Freedmen's Town was added to the National Register of the Historic Places list. Because it was placed on the register, federal redevelopment funds could no longer be used to demolish structures. And so as you can see over here, there's some pictures, right? This is the house of Jake Yates, originally in the Fourth Ward and now at Sam Houston Park. Let's see, what else can we find here? So there's the church. That's the Freedmen's Town Historic District. The former Edgar M. Gregory School, now the African American Library at Gregory School. Cool. The Fourth Ward Cottage, a cottage dating back to at least 1866 that is now in Sam Houston Park. Antosh Missionary Baptist Church, now in downtown Houston. The historic oaths of Allen Parkway Village. Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas Houston branch. And then, of course, you got the newer homes in Fourth Ward. Shotgun shacks in the Fourth Ward. Gregory Lincoln Education Center. Carnegie Vanguard High School, a magnet school. African American Library at the Gregory School. And the remains of Bethel Missionary Baptist Church. All right, so I want to go ahead and skip down just a little bit. Let's go down to culture. Let's go down to demographics. Okay, so the population of the Fourth Ward has also been steadily decreasing with each decade. According to the 2000 census of the super neighborhoods defined by the city of Houston, the Fourth Ward super neighborhood had the lowest population, with 590 households, or a total population of 1,706. That year, 54% of the residents were Hispanic. 37% were non-Hispanic Black, 7% were non-Hispanic whites, 2% were non-Hispanic Asian, and 1% were non-Hispanic others. In 2015, the super neighborhood had 4,085 residents. That year, 46% of the residents were non-Hispanic whites, 27% were non-Hispanic Blacks, 18% were Hispanics, and 9% were non-Hispanic Asians, and the percentage of non-Hispanic Asians were 0. But they said in 1870, 36% of the African American in Houston lived in Fourth Ward, while in the 1910, 27% lived in the Fourth Ward. While the area around Freemanstown is traditionally Black, Hispanic, and non-Hispanic white have moved to the area in the recent years. All right, so if you want to find out more information, here's the reference at the bottom of the page. These are the reference notes so you can find out more information about Houston Fourth Ward. All right. Hello, peace, brother poet. How you doing? It's been a while. Peace. How you doing, brother? All right. So, just like any other story of any Black community that was striving, that was doing well economically, of course, there was the decline, as always, because you always got the gentrification taking place. And especially if you're in the downtown district area, more than likely the government, of course, are going to take over because they want to build like interstates and other public facilities. So residents are pretty much forced out of their own community. So it's like all the Black towns that's been around, majority of them are no longer here, or they became non-existent, or they became part of the National Historic, they became part of the National Park Historic list. So with that being said, this is why many of us don't know about these Black towns. We think that we didn't have, our ancestors didn't have their own community, or they didn't have their own town, which they did, but it has been demolished, or it has been taken over by the government, basically considered as being part of the national park. So, and those that are still around, you're not going to hear much about them in the mainstream. You're not going to hear much about the information in regard to those areas, right? And they're still struggling to survive. So I get very skeptical. I get really, really, really skeptical when we talk about the integration. Because integration is, especially when it comes down to neighborhoods, right? It has its pros and it has its cons. The pros is, the diversity, and you have various groups of people living amongst each other. But here's the con. The con is now you have the diversity taking place. You got one group or multiple ethnic groups that's taking over the area, which was originally the historic town of another group. So that means if it's a historical Black town and you got people that are Italian, Asians, and all these other backgrounds, more than likely they're going to come in there to do business in the community, right? They're going to control the resources of that community. So what was once the Black town is no longer controlled by those who of that African descent, but it's controlled by other people, and they control the narrative, and they run in properties and businesses over in the areas. And where does that leave you as somebody whose ancestor have some type of historical foundation regarding to the areas? Where does that leave you? Where do the people go from there? You have no choice but to move out because you can't keep up. So this is why I have the feelings that I have, especially about capitalism. I mean, I understand people is for capitalism, but if we look back the history of capitalism and what it has really done to us economically, do you really want to support capitalism? And if you do support capitalism, how are you going to bring about group economics? How can't you bring about group economics? Where do you go with that? You have to incorporate some type of idea. You can't just solely rely on capitalism. You have to incorporate some type of principles. What principle would you be using if you support the concept of capitalism? What principles? Are you going to use the socialist principle? Are you going to use a democracy principle? What type of principle would be used to help better enhance the capitalist society that we're living in? If for those who may be for capitalism, how are you going to go about doing it? And that's the question I have to ask. How we're going to go about bringing group economics. And then also, not just the economic part that's very important, but what about the psychology of the people? I mean, it's all good to have economics, but what's good is economics when there is no psychology. When the psychology of many of us is very dysfunctional and it's messed up. What good is economics? And I'm just asking because I've been contemplating on this for a while, and I wondered to myself, okay, we talk about economics, we talk about bringing resources, etc., which is great, but what's good is finances if the psychology and the mindset of the people is corrupted? How are you going to get into them psychologically to understand the importance of dealing with economics and group economics? Because that's where you got to tackle it. But I guess people don't feel like the psychology part is not as important as economics. And when it all ties together, and it's just as important. It has a lot of it plays a lot of role into how we go about dealing with the government, how we go about dealing with economics, how we go about dealing with our society. All of that plays a major factor. So if you take away psychology out the picture, right? If you take that out the picture, or if you take away the anthropology, then how are you going to be able to function as a community? How are you going to be able to function economically? That's just a thought that I have. So I want to give you guys some reference that you can look up for yourselves. If you guys want to know more about Texas and the historical areas and sites of African Americans and the history, all of that great stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the sources. All right. This right here is called Black Texans, a history of African Americans in Texas from 1528 to 1995. Now, this book was written in 95. However, it still has some relevant points, I'm sure. So let's see. Let's go down. Let's look at the let's all right, let's look at a paragraph on here. All right, it says most free black immigrants came as farmers like Emmanuel J. Hardin of Bozeroto County and Jean-Baptiste Martorell of Nacogdoches in 1820s. Others followed a variety of occupation. Robert Thompson became a rancher in Montgomery County during 1831. James Richardson sold oysters and refreshment Velasco and on the St. Louis on the coast. Greenberry Logan, a blacksmith from Missouri, reached Texas in 1831. Some mulattoes sought with considerable success to pass the color line in frontier Texas. A slave pointed out two well-dressed men among the whites at a dance in Bastrop as persons of African descent. Others felt no need to disguise their racial heritage. Both church and state under Spanish rule had taken official position which restrained harsh treatment and promoted manumission of black slaves, though such laws frequently were ignored. Intermarriage among whites, blacks, and Indians in Mexico proved fairly common, since Spanish immigrants remained rather limited and virtually eliminated Negroes as a separate ethnic group by the late 18th century. Thus, Mexicans generally accepted black people, especially mulattoes, more readily than did the predominantly Anglo population across the Sabine. Clearly, sparse frontier population and the greater acceptance by Mexicans created more freedmen of movement and opportunity for free Negroes in Texas than in the United States. Goyens paid a bribe to avoid enslavement in the 1820s before he officially established his free status. Thereafter, he attended Mexican social events, acted as an arbitrator and attorney in the Mexican courts, and voted in a local election. All right, so just giving a little brief outline of that. Just check this book out, Black Texans, a History of African Americans in Texas from 1528 to 1995. Written by Alwyn, was it Allen? Yeah, Allen Barr. Alwyn Barr. That's where this book, that's who is the author of this book. All right. And so it's the second edition. Okay. Yep. But anyways, so the reason why you have a lot of strong Mexican population in Texas, because at one point in time, Texas was a part of Mexico. Okay. So it's not just Texas. You will find it in New Mexico. You will find it in Arizona and even California. Parts of California all the way up to Nevada. That was all Mexico. But of course, Mexico lost that land due to United States. So they lost that land. So that was their original territory. So which is why you find a strong Mexican population. Like I was told, like San Antonio has a very strong Mexican population. They do. They have a very strong population because of the history. So it's pretty much expected. Now let's go ahead and look at another source. So this source right here goes into the colonies in Texas as far as the African American communities are concerned. So this book right here, if you guys can see it, and you can check it out for yourself, it's called Freedom Colonies, Independent Black Texans in the Time of Jim Crow. All right, so let's read the introduction. Let me go ahead and zoom that in a little bit. Freedmen settlements were independent rural communities of African American landowners and land squatters that formed in the South in the years after emancipation. These freedom colonies, as blacks sometimes called them, were to a degree anomalous in a post-war South where white power elites readily resumed social, economic, and political control, and the agricultural system of the sharecropping came to dominate. Beginning as early as 1866, Southern whites shiftily assimilated their former slaves into a pattern of cotton rent farming that maintained as many of the social controls of slavery as landowners, local officials, and state governments could devise. Dreams of land and independence ended early for most former slaves, generalizing about the 2 decades after 1870. Historian Lorraine Swagner Swagner noted that freedmen struggled against oppressive white landlords. The debilitating effects of the crop lien system, discrimination in wage rates, seemingly endless debt, and an increasingly hostile racial climate. Even the most diligent, persistent, frugal, and industrious blacks were often unable to overcome the iron-like grip of whites on the land or the law wages. Most observers of blacks in the rural deep south during these decades were struck by the continuity with the pre-war era. Negroes laboring in the fields on white-owned plantation in much the same manner as they had during slavery. They were also struck by the deplorable living condition. After observing the circumstances of black sharecroppers in the South, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote in his classic 1903 study, The Soul of Black Folk, the size and arrangements of a people's home are no unfair index of their condition. All over the face of the land is the one-room cabinet, now standing in the shadow of the big house, now staring at the dusty road, now rising dark and somber among the green of the cotton fields. It said, Schwarzenegger continued, the cabinet built with rough-hewn lumber was nearly always dark, dingy, and dilapidated, without windows, light, or proper ventilation. It smelled of must, eating, and sleeping. Containing 8 to 10 people, it stood as a silent symbol of degradation of landless blacks in the deep South. So compelling to historians has been this dark image of the degradation of landless black, of the rise of sharecropping, debt slavery, the neo plantation, Jim Crow apartheid, that they often fail to notice a counter movement from 1870 to 1890 at the same time that what historian Pete Daniel called the shadow of slavery tightened its hold on most black farmers in the South. Nearly 1/4 of them got their own land. Land ownership rose more precipitously in Texas than any other southern state. In 1870, only 1.8% of the state's black farmers owned land. By 1890, an astonishing 26% of them did. But just after the turn of the century, black Texas land ownership peaked at 31%. All right, so I'm not just going to go any further, but I'm just going to leave it right there. And this goes into towns like Freetown and the settlements and all the other African American communities in Texas area. So you guys, if you want to check this book out, you can. Let's see, what year was this book written? This book was written in 2005. So you guys should check this out. It was written in 2005. And the name of the author is Thad Satin and James H. Conrad. Thad Satin and James H. Conrad. Okay. All right. All righty. Let me see. Someone put Bracketville, Texas, Gullah community. You know what? I'm glad that you brought that up, Gullah Griot. Let me go ahead and look that up real fast while I'm on here. Let me look that up real quick. I'm back. I'm sorry about that. I'm here. I'm sorry. Uh, okay, Fort Clark, Texas. Fort Clark. All right, I was too busy trying to look up information about Bracketville, Texas, because somebody had brought that up. So I'm sorry about that for the sound being out. Yeah. All right, let me go ahead and look under Afro-Seminoid Creole. So this is what I came across. Let's see what they talking about here. So Afro-Seminoid Creole is a dialect of Gullah spoken by Black Seminoid in scattered communities in Oklahoma, Texas, and northern Mexico. Um, let's see. Afro-Seminoid Creole was first identified in 1978 by Ian Hancock, a linguist at the University of Texas. Before that, no one in the academic world was aware of its existence. ASC arose when enslaved Gullah speakers from South Carolina and Georgia coastal region, later called Black Seminoids, escaped from slavery on rice plantation and fled into Florida wilderness. This process began in the late 1600s and continued into the 1830s. In Florida, the Black Seminoids built their own independent communities, but established a close partnership with the Seminole Indians. That alliance helped protect both groups during the First and Second Seminole War. It says present-day speakers of Afro-Seminoid Creole live in Seminole County, Oklahoma, Bracketville, Texas, and in the United States, and in Nacimiento de los Negros, Cahulia, Mexico. ASC is threatened with extinction as there are only about 200 native speakers today. The speakers of ASC are all descendants of the Black Seminoles who settled in Florida, and then through a series of wars and other threats were driven first to what is now Oklahoma and northern Mexico, and later into Texas after the Civil War. The speakers of ASC are all 65 years of age or older, so unless action are soon taken, ASC will likely be extinct in 1 or 2 decades. All right. So that's all the information I could gather about Bracketville, Texas. Let me see if I can find something on Bracketville, Texas. Let me see something. Bracket. Let me see if I can find something. Okay, so here's some information I found. And peace to the chat room. Peace to everybody in the chat. All right, so here's some information I found on Bracketville, Texas. So let's see. Founded in 1865 as Las Moras, name of a nearby spring and the creek it feeds. The town initially was was a supply stop on the old San Antonio El Paso Road and a supply depot for the U.S. Army Fort Clark. The fort was established the same year. Later, the town was named Brackett after Oscar B. Brackett, the owner of the first dry goods store in the area. In 1873, when a post office was awarded, Ville was appending to the name to differentiate it from another town. The town grew quickly through the 19th century with the expansion of the garrison at Fort Clark for the Indian Wars. The town's fortunes were tied to the forts. For many years, it was the base of the famous Buffalo Soldiers made up of African Americans. Demographically, Bracketville had a large portion of Black Seminoles, people of mixed African American and Seminole ancestry who originated in Florida. Then the rest of West Texas, as they had been recruited by the U.S. to act as scouts for the Buffalo Soldiers and settled with their families in the town. All right. And it says during the slavery years, they had been living in a settlement in northern Mexico to escape U.S. condition. Their language developed in Florida, Afro-Seminole Creole, is still spoken by some in Bracketville. Then it goes on to say, after the Buffalo Soldier moved out of Fort Clark with the warning of the Indian Wars, it was used as a cavalry post. The Seminole Negro Indian Scouts were finally disbanded as a unit in 1914. Virtually every cavalry unit in the U.S. Army was stationed at or trained at Fort Clark at one time or another. It says in the 1943, during World War II, the U.S. Army activated the 2nd Cavalry Division, which was to be the Army's last horse-mount unit by 1944. Even the 2nd had been mechanized. The Fort Clark, so long a center of Mount Cavalry, was targeted for closure. Before its closure, the fort was used as a German prisoner of war camp. Because of the family of soldiers at the fort and African American veterans and descendants who had settled here during the war, the U.S. government funded construction of a high school for Black students, which opened in April of 1944, so the children of veterans could be educated. The state of Texas was still racially segregated. It had essentially disenfranchised blacks since the early 20th century by its voter registration and electoral requirements, and the white legislature consistently underfunded black education and services. Officially classified as a four-year high school, it is believed to have been the only one of its kinds between San Antonio and El Paso at that time. All right, so after the fort officially closed in 1946, it had a variety of uses. In 1971, it was converted and adapted as a resort and retirement center. The historic district of the fort is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The resort is not the economic engineering the fort once was, and Brackenville has shrunk from its peak population during the war years. All right, so let me see something. All right. Somebody put, I can send the pictures of the pages to your inbox. Okay, you can do that. Yeah, you can send me the information, Gullah. Make sure you send that information to me. If you can send me a book or a source or any type of PDF regarding to Brackenville and Fort Clark, then that'll be great as well. If you can send me some information about the Gullah people in Texas, I can do that. I mean, I came across some sources on the website, but certain articles you have to pay for, because they're not cheap. So I did come across something, but some of these articles they want you to pay some money for. I mean, all right. But yeah, thank you for sharing that information, Gullah. Thank you. Because I do see where they did speak they have a Creole language out there, which is the African Seminole Creole language in Brackenville, Texas. And did mention that the Gullah people did, when they escaped from South Carolina and Georgia coastal area, and they went through Florida, and some went through Mexico. And not only they went through Mexico, they went through Texas. So yeah. Thank you, Brother Bakari. I appreciate that. Thank you for coming through. Yeah, I tried to make sure that I post up information. I really do. That's what I'm here to do. That's my passion. I enjoy doing it. Thank you. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for being very supportive. All right. Yep. So, other than that, I want to thank you guys that's in the chat, that's been tuning in, watching. I really appreciate that a lot. Thank you so much. For those of you that are on my Facebook page, unfortunately, I am inactive on my page, but if you are my Facebook friend and you got some information that you want to send, you can send it in my inbox. But other than that, I'm inactive at the moment, so I can't post anything. I can't do anything. So yeah, Facebook got me on block as of right now. So yeah, I'm blocked. I am blocked. But you guys, if you want to send something, or if you want to do a show with me, then reach out to me on my inbox. All right. If you want to do a show about a subject matter, then I can make that arrangement. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for watching, being very supportive. I hope you all enjoy your day. Be safe on this Juneteenth. Yeah, Facebook is blocking a lot of people. Yeah. So I'm blocked for a while though. But that's okay. That's okay. I ain't gonna let that get my spirit down. So that's okay. As long as people know where I'm at. But anyways, enjoy your Juneteenth. Celebrate. Have a good time. Please be safe. I mean, please be safe. Okay, because we still in this pandemic. And I don't know why people think because everybody done got not everybody, that people done got fascinated that all of a sudden that the pandemic is going away. No, it's not. It's still here. So please take precautionary action and be safe and be careful. All right. If you gotta wear the mask, please wear a mask. We had an incident out here where I'm at where a man was told to put on the mask in the grocery store and he ended up killing the cashier, which did not make any sense at all. You know what I'm saying? It's not that hard. Just follow the rule. I mean, I know it's hot as hell and we don't want to wear that mask on, but we got to in certain places. Certain places, they ain't going to just let you come up in there without a mask. That's just the bottom line. That's just what it is. So just please, just follow those guidelines. Make sure you guys check out Team Osiris. Also, not only check out Team Osiris, but because we got 3 channels, you can check out Team Osiris Reloaded, Team Osiris Rises, and the regular Team Osiris channel. Make sure you check that out. Make sure you support brother Chris Harris. He's doing his thing. Support him and support brother Kansu Sheshmu Amun. He got his thing going on with the Spirit University, and also he gets into the finances and all that great stuff. So check him out and make sure you check out Descendant of Mali. Descendant of Old Mali. Descendant of Old Mali is with Malik Kamara. The brother goes into about West African history, West African culture, spirituality. They get into the talk about the languages and all that great stuff, the tribes. If you want to learn more about West African history, you can check out the brothers over there on Descendant of Old Mali. They doing their thing. So shout out to brother Malik Kamara, brother Carlos, brother Gullah Geechee. He's doing his thing over there. Make sure y'all support them. Check them out. All right. And also check out the previous video that I did with brother Ngozi about the quantum physics and the afterlife. That video was pretty great. So, just make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell on my channel. So whenever I come on, you guys will be aware of that. And make sure you check out the contents. Also share the channel. Please do so if you like. And if you like what I'm doing and you want to support me and you want to, you want to send some, send some little donation or a little cash or whatever, as a way of saying that you appreciate and whatever. If you want to send something, you can go ahead. My cash app is at the bottom of the screen, which is $Tip World. So if you want to send me a little something, then I'll be gladly accepting that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. But other than that, yeah, I'm gonna call it a quit. So y'all have a good one and y'all be safe out there. And that's it. And some of us got to go to work, like myself. I hate that I have to go to work because other than that, I sure would be celebrating Juneteenth if I didn't have to work today. But that's just how it is. You got to take care. You got to do what you got to do. So it is what it is. It ain't no fun, though, but it is what it is. But until then, let's observe this holiday. Let's celebrate. Let's be happy. Let's be joyful. Let's have a good time. And, let's just be proud of our ancestry. Do not be ashamed of who you are. You know what I'm saying? You come from a long line of people that have struggled. You have come from a long line of people that has made it possible. You come from a beautiful people. You know what I'm saying? You come from a foundation. Right, exactly. That's right. Celebrate in heart and mind. And ain't no stopping us. That's why you got to celebrate that in your heart and in your mind. And don't let it stop you. So don't let all this little mainstream media coverage stop you from celebrating. You've been celebrating. So why you stopping? Be proud of that. Be proud of who you are. And that's it. And what more can I say? I wouldn't trade for the world. I wouldn't trade what I am in this skin. I wouldn't trade what I am in my DNA for nothing. All right, but until then, I'll talk to you guys later. So I'm about to go ahead and log off. Peace and power and elevation. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is your girl Tiffany, and I'm out.